it creates stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Too much stress is not a good thing, but no stress is not a good thing either. Like when I log in, it's almost like, I can think back to the times where I was, it all worked in a cycle, right? Where it's like I lost, which stressed me out, especially when we got near the top, right? Because we were dropping like
Yeah,
fucking
you're
upwards
dropping
of
a lot,
1K
man.
fame, right?
Yeah,
It's
more.
insane. And so I don't want to do that. So if I die, then it's like fuck. Okay, now I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I might log off, but when I come back, I'm going to be a lot more motivated to do my positioning a little better. Might be a little bit more motivated to do a few more boss rotations to get that boot upgrade that I've always needed because now I'm going to have more defense and I'm going to survive longer. Like it's a self fulfilling cycle where you're stressed to want to do better, so it
True.
pushes you to do it, right? Like right now, I don't really feel a lot of stress. The only stress that I feel in this game is that if I don't participate in enough PvP each week, I'm going to slowly lose my prestige.
Hordes.io is a browser MMORPG. The entire objective of the game is to farm gear and level up. Along the way, you will fight other players and team up with your corresponding faction. The game was created by a single developer known as Deck, but being the only one was the game's biggest downfall, as the game was completely reliant on one single person. Before the massive surge of players into the game, there was an alpha stage. This saw the introduction of things such as clans, items, and more. There's a video talking about the evolution of Hordes.io in its early stages by Tassels, which you can find in the description. The open beta of the game was released on the 8th of November 2019. Shortly after the release of the beta, the third map, known as Fable, was also released. The game saw a huge spike in player population after a large MMORPG based content creator known as the LazyPeon released a video reviewing Hordes.io.
Hordes is a Western-made 3D open-world MMORPG with large-scale PvP that can be played from your browser, and before you click away from this video, I ask that you give it a chance.
He saw the simplicity of the game and showed the easy accessibility for anyone to play and try it out. It being a browser game and you being able to log in with your Google account made it a very easy decision to just give the game a shot. After the game saw a rise in population, the core developer updated the game at an incredible pace. Some of these updates included being able to deposit your gold, displaying the rarity of items dropped along with a rolling feature, a recall to return back to your base instead of having to type /die, and charms that were later added, which added some complexity towards the fights. After the rise in player population, the early stages of the game felt fluent and fun. There were players all over the map, everywhere you looked. This allowed you to get into a party to progress through the game, whilst constantly having the threat of being attacked by the opposing faction trying to contest the farming locations. This created instant competition between the two factions, which gave the players a sense of purpose and motivation to get stronger and progress faster.
So we go into our character here, and we spawn in. Now, you might be wondering, how do I level up? Well, what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to leave spawn. Oh, there's a monster. Now be careful. You want to sneak up on him. You don't want him to see you. You take a shot, and you go in. You go in. You don't stop shooting. You don't stop shooting until he's dead. Till he drops dead. There we go.
After some time after the beta was released, another MMORPG by the name of Albion Online just finished a season and went into off-season. This meant there was little to do in Albion, resulting in some players and even entire guilds migrating over to Hordes.io for some time. Albion Online is a PvP-oriented game, and so the players that were coming over had nothing but PvP in mind. This resulted in some of the best and biggest fights the game has ever seen. These players migrating over had a good time in Hordes, but eventually the game turned repetitive, and there was no bigger goal to accomplish other than grinding best in slot gear. There was nothing for guilds to achieve or conquer either. Together with this, the developer was not able to capitalize on the growth and had a different mindset on what he wanted to do with the game, as Hordes.io is originally a World of Warcraft fan project, and the developer had never heard of Albion Online before. This would eventually lead to these players exiting the game for good. Clans have been in Hordes.io since almost the very beginning. Sadly, the only reason to be in a clan is to have a tag in front of your name. Many players have been waiting for a clan update, adding features such as simply being able to take out the gold from the clan treasury, to even a clan war type of game mode, where different clans can fight each other at a scheduled time of the day. But unfortunately, we would never see this. Fame duping was one of the earliest exploits that was in the game. The way it worked was you and a friend could kill each other over and over again, and the fame would begin to dupe, resulting in both players getting loads of fame. This would eventually result in some players to begin doing another popular game-breaking mechanic known as multiboxing. Players would begin to log in multiple accounts and play the game in different browsers on different characters at the same time. This created many ways to break the game even more, such as farming in a full party of 10 as one individual, which ruined the entire game's economy. This also destroyed the PvP aspect of the game, with players using multiple characters simultaneously and buffing themselves to give themselves an unfair advantage.
Oh my god. Oh my god!
This was later fixed by not being able to have multiple buffs anymore, but this lasted far too long, with players complaining for months on end. Twinking was something that was in the game for far too long. Players could, for example, reach level 25 and get themselves best in slot gear for their respective level and log onto their main account to +6 to the gear. This resulted in players who were new to the game getting one-shot by twinks waiting for them. Some players even went to the extreme to create level 1 twinks and camp outside the opposing faction base. They then would wait for new players coming into the game to kill them over and over again. This would result in many players quitting the game and never logging back in again due to frustration. The arena was a feature that was introduced pretty early into the game. Once charms were implemented, arena became mandatory. However, players noticed they weren't fighting real people. Since there wasn't anyone playing arena most of the time, and since there were also different brackets you were put into, it was difficult to find a match. This resulted in the very first implementation of bots into the game. Players would mindlessly attack AI to try and win an arena match, which almost no one enjoyed. If you wanted to climb the ladder, it was near impossible with the scaling of the bots and the higher rated arena matches. Basically, if you got bad RNG and matched with 3 shamans, for example, it would not be possible to win, as their heals were just too high. Events were held by different GMs to keep the community active, but the events quickly became repetitive and overall unenjoyable, because it was the same every single weekend. The moderation in Hordes.io is done by close friends of Deck. Although, this moderation never had guidelines. The times you were muted or banned for were completely decided by how the moderator was feeling that day. Some simple things could easily get you muted for as long as 30 days. They also created a PTR, which was implemented by Deck, to give feedback on the game and find bugs. The people that were invited to this PTR were not your average players. They mainly consisted of players who constantly praised the developer in the Discord, and those who did not like the features, or if they gave their own honest feedback, were swiftly removed, never to be invited again. The fame update was a turning point in the game's future. Removing fame loss on death took away the greatest feeling of the game.
Game is so. I'm gonna smash my keyboard.
Killing a player with a large amount of fame felt incredible. It took ages to get loads of fame from killing low fame players who only dropped, at times, only 3 fame on death. If you were to see a high value target, you would do everything in your power to take them out. And on the other hand, if you were a high value target yourself, you would take the gameplay more seriously and try your best to survive and win the fight. Some players would lose upwards of 1,000 fame when they died, which would result in hours to regain the fame back if they died multiple times. But sadly, this was all gone. There was no point fighting anymore. The game turned into who could get the most amount of kills and damage on the new war leaderboards. With the crit and heal changes, it turned into 2 blobs smashing into each other, with whoever could cast their abilities first winning the fight. When Deck caught wind of Shadowlands and WoW, and the world needed him the most, he vanished. He left right after he dropped the fame update, which was regarded as one of the worst. A few months go by, and Deck comes back from his WoW vacation. He begins working on a major update that would forever change the core aspect of the game. Many players were very excited for this update. It introduced the addition of a new world boss known as Gloomfury, which replaced Shatterspine. It also added PvP objectives that would benefit the winning faction for the boss fight. When it was introduced, there was a large player spike, with 2 times to 3 times more players in the game compared to before the update. But sadly, this update was not as good as some hoped for. The PvP objectives resulted in even more of a splash of players walking into each other, and with the new skill Volley, a single archer could burst an entire faction down with the pure speed of the ability. Also, as an archer or a mage, you could literally one-shot another player with Bone Shot or Shatterfrost. And warriors were even worse, as they had a new skill called Whirlwind that melts any player that comes near them. This was the new way to get fame in Hordes. In the end, the game has not died, but it has lost a majority of its core player base, which were looking for a PvP MMO. The boss fight that was introduced in the most recent update is actually pretty well made. It has some interesting mechanics, which was a surprise to many players. But you must farm the boss for basically an hour straight to try and get some drops. And even if you do manage to get these drops, a new rune was also added. This allowed players to +7 their gear, which costs a ton of gold. And gold was extremely difficult to farm now, unless you were a multi-boxer back in the day and had a large stockpile of gold. The obelisk also gave the players medals so that they could buy charms, but this made the arena obsolete, and there was no point to ever queue arena again. In the end, the game appeals to a different audience, who are just looking for a farming simulator.